Let's start at the Maui Invitational, where the Carolina basketball team has been, what's the best way to put this? The yin and the yang of the Carolina basketball team. The comeback win against Dayton, 92-90, 2 nights ago. And then, I guess we could say early this morning. It was early this morning.
Yeah.
When they lost by double digits to Auburn. And in that game, I was given the option to place a bet prior to that game. Knowing what R.J. Davis and Elliot Cadeau and Seth Trimble had done against Dayton, they were getting ready to go up against the fourth-ranked team in the nation, Auburn. And rankings early in the season are general consensus of what we believe teams are going to look like as they move into, honestly, the regular season, which is why Carolina's ranked, which is why Duke is ranked, and we're going to talk about Duke in a hot second here. But Carolina, I was presented with an option to place a little same-game parlay, a little sports betting, just for fun, to place some money on this game. Now, R.J. Davis was pretty good odds at scoring 18 points. Night before, he had shot the ball like 19 times, was kind of the clutch guy against Dayton. Seth Trimble, I had him plus 12, I think, and Elliot Cadeau in double figures as well. And it was a good bet right up until I started thinking about who they were going to face. And I reminded myself of what I had been saying about North Carolina since the start of this season and watching them play against the likes of American and whatnot, is that this is a backcourt-heavy team. And if they faced someone in the post, someone that was going to give them trouble, that backcourt would have to do a little bit more because there wasn't going to be a lot going on with that front court action. And boy, did that come true.
We also can't talk about the struggles of North Carolina without mentioning R.J. Davis. The reigning ACC Player of the Year, preseason All-American, was just held to a season-low 12 points on 5 of 11 shooting. That is very uncharacteristic of R.J. Davis. And it was clear to me, Paul, I don't know about you, but when Davis is off, it's clear that this Tar Heels offense just doesn't function the same way. He's the engine that makes everything run, and Auburn's defense made sure to keep him in check last night or this morning.
You're right. I see R.J. Davis was consistent. But R.J. Davis scoring 12 points, that's a role player 12 points. That's not stir the drink 12 points.
That's not the 20 points that he had the other night against Dayton to help lead North Carolina to that comeback victory.
Elliot Cadeau can score 12, and I'll be happy with that. Seth Trimble,
Jalen Withers.
Withers, they can score 12. I'll be happy with that. Not R.J. Davis. And they went up against a big who forced them to do different things because the inside presence of North Carolina is not perfect and not refined by any means. Johnny Broome, senior, 6'10" for Auburn, going to be a monster factor all season long. He puts up big numbers when they play big teams. He puts up big numbers when they play awful teams. His low this season is 18. His high this season is 20. His last 2 ranked opponents, including North Carolina, he scored 21 and 23 and managed double-doubles in both games.
I mean, the story of that game starts and ends with Johnny Broome. The big man delivered an absolute monster performance, 23 points and a career-best 19 rebounds. He completely dominated the paint, setting the tone early and keeping Auburn in control throughout the game.
And now North Carolina faces Michigan State. So, Hubert Davis, what does this team need to do as they roll into yet another test? Michigan State is not a slouch. They are 5-2 going into this game at the Maui Invitational.
It's the same thing about the trenches, and I've said that it has nothing to do about physical size. It does with the size of one's heart, and that we have to be able to rebound the basketball. We have to be able to get those loose balls. We have to play with composure in situations and in games like this. And I just felt like we lost our way and didn't do the things that we normally do out there on the floor.
So tonight, you can't lose your way. You can't lose your way. And it's Michigan State, and Michigan State's not going to be some big world beater, I promise you, but they are 5-2. They have the loss to Kansas. Does everybody lose to Kansas? Is everybody losing to Kansas?
Everybody in the state of North Carolina so far. Maybe NC State can fix that. I want to touch on something that Hubert Davis just said there in that soundbite. because he said something that should be very unsettling for North Carolina basketball fans. And I'm talking like the diehards, the guys that are out, the donors that traveled out there to the Maui Invitational that you see all over the television screen. It's about the size of one's heart. It's about getting rebounds. It's about diving for loose balls. What is something that has been a standard for North Carolina basketball throughout the years?
Yeah,
that phrase right
some
there.
Hustle and grit, man.
And the fact that Hubert Davis is having to come out and say that in a post-game press conference should tell you the uneasy conversations that he's probably having to have in the postgame. I mean, the fact that Roy Williams is sitting courtside and you're not seeing Carolina basketball, as we like to say, push the ball up the court, run tempo, dive for loose balls, that's a concern. And North Carolina these past 2 games has lost their composure, and it's bitten them bad.
You can't keep coming back every night. You can't come back from double-digit deficits every night. It was an 8-point game at half, and within 3 minutes of that second half starting, it was 18, and it was all over. It had nothing to do with swagger. It had nothing to do with hustle. Auburn outplayed them.
Well, that's also another thing, Paul. I mean, this North Carolina team is talented, don't get me wrong, but they've yet to put together a full game this season.
Agree.
They even had their struggles against American in the first half. It just so happened that in the second half, 3-point shots finally started falling. They were able to run away with it. But you think about the Elon game, the Kansas game, the American game, the Dayton game. And then last night, they've yet to put together a full 40-minute game. And 9 times out of 10, they've been having to play behind.
You close late, like they did with Kansas. They closed late on Kansas. Couldn't get that one going. It happened to Duke as well. It happened to Duke at the Champions Classic. So 3 games in 3 nights will test the mettle of North Carolina. There's no doubt about it. I expect R.J. Davis tonight against Michigan State in another late game, another game that's going to end right about midnight. He'll probably have 25 tonight because he'll take that as a challenge. If he listened to Graham Hill just mere moments ago, he'll take that as a challenge because he has to be the guy that makes things move. All right. Paul Ihander here, in for Tim Donnelly. The Drive here with Tim Donnelly on 99.9 The Fan. Graham Hill is here as well. Thanks for hanging out with us today, folks. A Getaway Wednesday. We can't let you get away, and we can't let Duke get away with what happened last night against Kansas. And everybody plays Kansas, and everybody tries to come back against Kansas.
They want to be in the ACC so bad. That's what it is.
And Kansas has found a way. Yeah, well said. Kansas has found a way to close out ACC teams. They found a way against Duke. Last night in Las Vegas, neutral site, kind of felt like a neutral site, lots of blue in place. Kansas jumped out on them pretty hardcore. And Duke really had no answers, and all they could do was sit back and watch it happen. And it wasn't even in slow motion. This was real-time tragedy, Shakespearean playing out in front of them. And then they had their second act, where they let everything happen in front of them, and they started clawing back. John Shire tried to play as much chess as he possibly could against Bill Self, even after Hunter Dickinson decided to kick a Duke player in the face, and he kicked him. Don't question it. It was a kick. The 24-year-old man was well aware of what he was doing.
Yeah, that was a twist no one was expecting. I don't know if Malik Brown would be the right person to be kicking in the face if you're Hunter Dickinson.
But I wonder, and you talk about poise with Carolina. Duke has some of that poise. They do. They get into those scraps with tie-ups and balls and whatnot. They release and walk away. I saw Proctor do it last night during one tie-up. I saw Flagg do it another. They find themselves in more valued positions when they don't get too hot when it comes to those moments, and they celebrate where they need to be. But they had so little to celebrate as they played the North Carolina game against Kansas, but they did that at Allen Fieldhouse. Instead, this was in Las Vegas. Gravity always wins. My kids hate that saying. It's a total dad phrase. They fall down. I kind of joke about it. It's probably a little bit of gaslighting on dad's part, to be fair. It's probably not fair to them either. But let's be honest, gravity always wins. And Kansas made some shots last night that gravity won. Like gravity was going to make that thing go in or not. And Duke fought back. There's no doubt about that. Duke fought back. But they gave too much of a leash to a very good basketball team. And you can only play chess so many times before you run into a grandmaster and you think you are really good and you let the game come to you and you let the game grow. But ultimately, you can't trade queens. You can't go pawn for pawn and just have a rook and a king left on the board because someone will figure it out before you do. And Duke tried and tried their best. And there was a lot of gamesmanship out there. Cooper Flagg was double-teamed all over the place. with or without the ball. They tried to make it hard for him until Flagg tried to figure out that, hey, you know what? I'm a little bit bigger than the guy that's guarding me, and I can make some things happen. But much like Davis and Carolina, Flagg couldn't be that guy all night, and he played, I think, 36 minutes against Kansas. And it doesn't matter if Concanepla had a last-minute three that didn't fall or whatever. It should have never come down to that.
Yeah.
It really shouldn't have come down to that.
No, you got to tip your hat to Kansas head coach Bill Self, a veteran move by him as far as we're going to double-team Cooper Flagg with or without the ball, and we're going to force Duke. We're not going to let one man beat us, right? You hear that term a lot in sports. So Kansas went right after Cooper Flagg, tried to flush them a little bit, and they forced Duke to try and beat them by shooting outside the arc. Now, Duke was able to get their shots inside the paint, and part of that was because Cooper Flagg was able to take advantage of Dickinson's absence. But the thing for Duke so far is that they've been struggling shooting from behind the arc a lot early on in this season.
Yeah, some of them have not been falling for sure. I think Proctor had found his shot last night for sure. I don't think you question that. Caleb Foster only played 15 minutes last night, which, again, maybe he was hurt. Maybe just the matchups weren't correct. Again,
I don't know what's going on with him. Yeah,
a lot of chess being played last night, but didn't quite work out the way that Duke wanted it to work out. And for the Blue Devils, they're going to learn by fire. John Shire trying to put a little bit of little silver lining on what happened last night in Las Vegas, talking about this young group, and no doubt this is a young group, how they are handling big spotlights.
They've handled it great. I mean, to play the schedule we have, these first 6 games, I've never been a part of something like this as a player, as a coach. And so to get tested this early and to be in a position where you're winning every game down the final stretch, it's right there for you, all 6 games. I think says a lot about the potential that this team has, but also the character right now that we have. To me, it's character. It's either you have a competitive spirit or you don't. And to come off a war against Arizona Friday and then come right back against these guys, I think it says a lot about our group that we just kept fighting.
We're just happy to be here. We're just happy to be here and be in this position, and 4-2, and so they're playing in big games, which gets you ready. And I understand that argument, and I've heard it from the hosts on this station. I've heard it from them about, these are good tests, and this will prepare them for February and March and whatnot. And I totally understand that reasoning. I get it. I get where you want to come with that. But when it comes down to these games, you didn't close out. You haven't. You didn't close out against Kentucky. Kentucky found a way. You beat Arizona. You beat Arizona pretty bad. And that maybe Arizona was a little bit overrated in how that experience was. And I'm not trying to take away from that win, but then you played Kansas. And Kansas found a way to win, and you didn't. And so there's lessons to be learned. I totally understand that. But at this point in the season, those same teams, Kentucky, Kansas, it's not like all their lineups came back too. So they're taking the same test you are, but they're passing. You're hoping that all these pop quizzes right now set yourself up for later on down the line. We know the ACC schedule is not an easy gauntlet to run. We understand that. To get into that postseason and whatnot. That's where the tests are going to come. I totally get the idea, and I'm a big favor of big matchups and Feast Week and all these things that are made for television and all these things that we carry here on 99.9 The Fan. But I'm not sure if that's the right way to build up confidence in young players. They're not going to shoot themselves out of trouble, and they're not going to be able to shoot their way back into every game. And Carolina has proven that. And I think Duke has just done it now twice.
I'm glad you bring that up, where you say that Duke's not going to be able to shoot their way out of trouble, because that's the main thing for me. Going back to the previous point that I made earlier in this segment, Duke shot just 50% from the field and 43% from three-point range. And while those numbers aren't terrible, that's not Duke basketball numbers that we've been used to seeing in previous years. And I get that this is a young group, right? This team runs through freshman Cooper Flagg and Concanepla, but to me, that tells a deeper story about this team's struggle from beyond the arc. Three-point shooting continues to be an Achilles for this Blue Devils squad early on. They had open looks throughout the game, but consistency so far has been an issue, and that's not going to get it done in ACC play.
It won't, and ACC play comes a little bit sooner than normal this season.